So, stay awake with us. After lunch is always a time where the eyelids get a little bit heavier. Some of you start to sneak out. I want you to stay because we hopefully have got some really interesting talks. So, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. And just whilst I'm introducing our first speaker, if my colleagues could potentially get that 5-minute timer up just to make it a little bit more pressurized for our speakers. A rowdy Scottish crowd. I love it. So, our first speaker, I'm very, very pleased to say, has actually also recently joined the Scottish Ambulance Service as an honorary researcher. So, I'd like to introduce Dr Vicky Joshi. Vicky is a physiotherapist by trade. She's joined the SALS family as the director for the Save a Life for Scotland recovery group. And Vicky's here today to talk to you about a qualitative study of experiences of people who have survived a cardiac arrest. Vicky's shaking her head, that's not what she's here today. And whoever's given me this...
Shall I just come and start?
I'd appreciate that, Vicky. So if we're ready to start the timer, and then Vicky, take it away.
Okay, I reckon I should get the extra 10 seconds for that. Okay, so... In fact, it hasn't started, so shall I just talk until it starts? Okay. So I'm actually going to talk about a research project that I talked about last year. So for those of you that were here last year, I came and talked about aftercare in general. And then one of the research projects that we've been doing is about bystanders, so people who've done CPR rather than survived cardiac arrest. But I am very interested in that as well. Okay, have we got a clicker? Oh, okay.
20 seconds.
Okay, all right, okay. Okay, so I've come this year to come back and report on the results. So we've finished the interviews now. So as I say, for those of you that were here last year, you might remember me putting this up. This was our recruitment flyer, looking for people in Scotland who've done CPR or witnessed CPR. I did 11 interviews in total. The majority were female relatives of the victim. But we also had a mix of people who were strangers, off-duty healthcare professionals, colleagues and volunteers. And also a mix of outcomes. So of the people that had the cardiac arrest, 7 survived and 4 died. So it being a qualitative study, what we look for is kind of the themes across the interviews. And I haven't got a lot of time, so I'm just going to do a very whistle-stop tour through what people talked about. So the psychological impact, very similar to previous research. What we see from people who've done CPR is high anxiety, guilt, worry, fear that they've done the wrong thing, fear that they've hurt somebody. Conflict and complexity of roles. So actually, it didn't really matter what skills or background or profession people came into doing the CPR, they still suffered that quite high worry, guilt, trauma afterwards. Support preferences, people talked about how important it was to have someone to talk to afterwards. However, they didn't always feel that they could put that on their family. Perhaps their family themselves had been through traumatic experiences and they didn't want to bring that back. So people appreciated things like the Chest, Heart, Stroke Scotland bystander support line, where they could talk to somebody who was kind of neutral and just tell their story. The other thing that came up a lot was actually these kind of idea of constructive activities post-event. So for a lot of people, they found it was really helpful to get involved in CPR training, to raise funds for AED placement or out-of-hospital cardiac arrest in general. So that was kind of interesting to hear from people. Overall, what came clear was, although we have this chain of survival that's incredibly important to improve survival, and we've already heard quite a lot about that today, actually one way of thinking about this might be to think about the bystander and their journey. And I've kind of made a sort of a chain of survival for bystanders, which starts actually earlier than you think. It starts with the CPR training. And then the cardiac arrest happens, and that time between, so you've got the person's on their own there with the person that's having the cardiac arrest before the EMS arrives. Then you've got the arrival of the EMS, and then after the EMS leaves, okay? And then life after the event. So again, there isn't time to talk about all the many things that go on and that people talked about, but I've just kind of pulled out a few quotes to illustrate some of the things that bystanders in Scotland talked about. So one of the things is it wasn't like the training, and I think everybody would recognise that. You know, very rarely, in fact, I can't think of any circumstance where, you know, a cardiac arrest happens in the middle of a gym, you know, in a nice, clean, safe environment. Another thing they talked about was the importance of the call handler or the dispatcher, or is it, they've written here the call person, that's how they termed it. So how important that was, listening to them and listening to the instructions and having that person on the other end of the phone. I couldn't find the button. Okay, so people talked about having done CPR training and knowing how to work the AED, but actually in that moment of blind panic, not being able to find the button, and that was interesting. They talked about when the EMS arrived, that they were so calm, that really helped, but they were surprised that perhaps they were asked to carry on with the CPR. One of the things that came up as well was after the EMS left was that the ambulance stuff was all still there. And also, no one talked to me afterwards. Okay, and that was more to do with the strangers who did CPR than the family members, actually. And then this concept of failed hero, so people who knew that they'd done really good CPR, they'd done everything right, but the person still died. And they talked about there was no news story, no flowers, no celebration with the family afterwards, and what that felt like. And of course, remembering that most people don't survive a cardiac arrest, so 9 out of 10 of our bystanders are potentially feeling like that. So what can we do? A couple of key points to end in my last 10 seconds. The emotional impact is high regardless of outcome, so whether someone survives or not, prior experience or relationship to the victim. And yes, survival is absolutely essential, but we are asking people to step up and do CPR. So what could we be doing at each stage of their bystander journey to perhaps reduce the impact? Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vicky. And as before, keep your questions poised at the end. I found it very interesting about the idea of an alternative chain of survival. So that's wonderful, Vicky. And I apologise, I robbed you of 30 seconds at the start there, so I'm glad you took that. I hadn't actually realised that the 5-minute timer turns amber and then red. It makes it even more scary as a true countdown. So our next Flash Talk speaker is Dr. Barbara Farquharson, a former colleague of mine at the university, and Barbara's now an associate professor at the University of Stirling. And Barbara's going to talk to you about a talk which I hope is titled, and forgive me if it's not quite correct, I hope is titled, Applying Behavioural Science to Enhance Call Handler Assistance and Increase Rates of CPR. This, in my mind, is some of the most interesting work that the ambulance service is involved in, and I hope it excites you all as well. So if you give Barbara a round of applause.
Is this on? Oh, yeah, it's on. You can hear me. Thank you for that very kind introduction. So I was here a couple of years ago, but to remind you, people who weren't here, what I'm about is seeing whether we can incorporate psychological behaviour change techniques into what call handlers say to the bystanders that Vicky was talking about to see if we can get to CPR faster. In earlier parts of this study, we identified these as the main barriers that we think we can do something about. We think these would be amenable to behaviour change techniques. We identified those from calls and from interviews with call handlers. Your clicker is holding things up. The blank screen is really helpful. But I don't know what's gone wrong there. But what that says is that we worked really closely with behavioural experts and experienced call handlers from all across the UK to develop wording that call handlers could say that includes the behaviour change techniques. And what we ended up with was a series of if-then statements. And this is an example of one of them. So if the call handler identifies that the caller is concerned about doing harm, then they would say a form of the wording on the right. So, for example, I understand you're concerned, but doing nothing is more harmful. We need to do CPR now. So having developed the wording, we wanted to check that the call handlers would know how to deploy it. So we did some reliability work where we gave 11 call handlers excerpts from recorded real calls to see if they could identify the barriers. So they were asked if there are any of these barriers in that excerpt or if there are no barriers at all. The call handlers did amazing. They got it right 85% of the time. But that isn't the real life of a call handler. They're not reading bits of paper, they're listening to things like this. If anyone's likely to be upset about hearing a real call, this is the time to leave. Okay, there should be an audio clip playing. Sorry, there was an audio clip of someone being very upset. And it was an example that one of these actors that we employed, we asked them to act out real words that people had said in real calls and to ask the call handlers to identify what the barriers were in each of those examples. So the call handlers still did great. They got it right 75% of the time. It's a much harder task. So now we're pretty confident that they know when to say the right thing. We also gave them lots of examples where there weren't barriers. And so across all of those, there wasn't a single time where the call handler said there was a barrier where there wasn't. So we're also really reassured that call handlers aren't going to be saying this stuff if there's no need for it. They're not wasting time. So now we're like, how do we check if this works? And we thought we would do a simulation, randomized controlled trial, mock up a cardiac arrest scenario, and see what people did. But there were a lot of uncertainties about that. Would we be able to get people to take part in something like that? Would we get the right people, or would we get young, fit people? How realistic would the scenario be, and would we see any of these barriers? And would people hate it? These were the things we were worried about. So we did, this time last year, we did a feasibility study with 20 people at the university, Napier University. Our first attempt at recruiting people was through the SHARE register. We were not optimistic. We were asking people to come and do a study where they had to travel to Napier, they had to take part in home emergency. But the good Scottish public really surprised us, and we made our number in a week. It was really easy. And the people who turned up hobbled in on sticks. They had grey hair, support dogs, severe depression. They were exactly the sorts of people we wanted, just ordinary members of the public. How well did the simulation do? Well, we managed to recreate barriers about physical capability, and people were concerned about doing harm, even though it was a plastic dummy. And we measured emotion before and after so that we could tell if it had affected people. And those scores changed really dramatically. People were really affected by this real life scenario, but crucially, not to the level where you could hear it in their voice, the way that I've heard it on the clip that didn't play. And what we didn't get were anyone saying that they didn't know how to do CPR or that they thought it was too late or futile. So it seems like simulation isn't the way to go. The science worked well, and actually I was really fearful that people would be traumatized by it and hate it, but 60% of them said to me they find it beneficial. And I think it was for the reason that Vicky highlighted, that it felt really real, and now they know they can do it. So they really enjoyed that part of it. So having decided against simulation, we've gone back to the British Heart Foundation, who've kindly agreed to fund a trial for real. We'll be, over the next year or so, training up 30 call handlers from the Scottish Ambulance Service and trying this out in real calls and measuring how quickly we get to CPR. I look forward to telling you more about that next year. Thank you.
Sorry, the audio didn't work. Thank you, Barbara. And just as a dovetail away from that, I think as Jim, our medical director colleague, voiced earlier, our call handlers are right at the heart of the journey within the ambulance service, and Barbara's project kind of lives in that space. And so in the coming years, with the potential that words and phrases start to change and start to help our call handlers more, hopefully we can look back on the work that Barbara's presented today as the kind of the start of that. So it's really fabulous. So the next flash talk is for about a really cool project that was introduced, first of all, last year. Dr. Harden mentioned it earlier, called PadMap. And I'm really chuffed to introduce a really cool guy, a non-clinical colleague of ours who's kind of working with the ambulance service to deliver something that's really cutting edge and may become a bit of a global symbol, if you like. So please give a warm round of applause for Ben.
All right, let's see if, okay. Yeah, thanks very much. We were here last year telling you that we, working in collaboration with some members of the team here, we were going to be launching PadMap. And this year I can come back and tell you about the launch. So firstly, I know there's quite a few of you who weren't here last year, may not know what PadMap is, and so it's trying to solve this problem. We know that AEDs work really well in the hands of a bystander, particularly when they're close by. And in that top chart, you can see Scotland, there was a 3-year period when Scotland was placing a lot of pads, still are, but you can see we doubled the number of pads in Scotland. But this is where we sort of see the problem. Over that same period, this is the kind of average usage of pads in bystander incidents, and it's not really changing at all. There could be lots of reasons for that. One of the reasons we think is that most pads are too far away. You can see the vast majority in Scotland are 500 meters away or more from cardiac arrests or historic cardiac arrests. So the team came together. It was a collaboration between lots of different individuals. You can learn about that collaboration on the website. What is it? It's a free tool to find optimal locations for new pads. And it's really good for individuals. You can just find your area, slide it down to one pad, and it will give you the optimal location. Or if you're a council or a larger pad placing organization, you can say we want to place 50, and it will find you the optimal 50 places, considering the impact these new pads will have on distances. Let's see. Okay, so this is a graph, well, this is a heat map of cardiac arrests in Edinburgh. Historically, you can see there's certain hot areas. And the way the tool's working is it's taking that historic cardiac arrest data, taking all the existing pad locations, bit of math, bit of AI, generating the optimal locations. And great news is we know it works. There was a trial in Falkirk where they placed around 100 pads, 40 or so using PadMap data. And compared to the others, we see them having twice the number of deployments and 66% more shocks. So placing optimally is a good thing. Okay, the tool's now live. It went live about 4 months ago. Just over 2,000 people have been on using it. And the data shows they're really highly engaged, which is great. So the next question is, will they start placing pads more optimally? What's next for us in the summer? The wider team, again, some of whom are here, will be deploying quite a few improvements based on feedback. We're also going to add feedback capture into the app so that when you're using it, you can feedback on your experiences. Gareth's recorded a lot of really helpful explainer videos, especially demystifying some of the kind of terminology around pad placement. And probably the most encouraging thing is we've got some new sources coming. So in progress, we're working with Welsh Ambulance Service and the Northern Irish Ambulance Service. Hopefully this year would be great. So if you're in one of those areas, you'll be able to use PadMap to find optimal locations in your region. Quite a few discussions ongoing with a variety of English ambulance services. And it's been really interesting to speak with Slovenia and Canada, who are in the position where they really want to improve pad placement, but don't necessarily have the data. So working with them to establish the feasibility of capturing that data. Okay, 2 last slides. How can you get involved? Number 1, please use it and feedback, even if you're not in Scotland or not from Scotland. Let us know what you think's working, what's not. Tell us if anything's confusing. If you're in Scotland, place a pad with it. That would really help us. Just share anything social, however, share it, make people aware of it. And if you're from an ambulance service somewhere else, come and talk to us and add your data. And hopefully, we can come back next year and Gareth and the team have designed a study, or are looking to design a study, where we look at, on average, are pads in Scotland starting to get closer to cardiac arrest, because that's the ultimate test. And so hopefully we'll share that next year. And you can help by placing a pad optimally, because that will influence the data. So thank you.
Great. So thanks, Ben. We've clawed back 30 seconds there. I didn't expect any time saving, but we've managed to do that. The next presentation is going to introduce a student paramedic who's right at the end of her third year, just about to be a paramedic and just to join the ranks of the colleagues in the room. So I'd like to welcome up Inez. So, we are going to chat to you about a piece of work that we've been looking into. We're trying to understand the potential impact of the presence of families at cardiac arrest events. Inez.
So it's quite well known. There's plenty of research surrounding family presence already. We've got some from the Nursing Times, we've got some from the paramedic, we've got within medicine, and then we've also got the guidelines from the Reasons Council themselves.
So we are following on this literature. Where we're interested to see is, can we pick up any signals of what is happening when families are present at our resuscitation events? So what did we do? Well, we looked at some cases that were initially a bit undiscovered to us. And I'm clicking the green button, but it's not moving. Wonderful. So we looked at some kind of unique cases where our colleagues had ticked a box on our form that says it was the recognition of life extinct. So they didn't think this patient was survivable, but they also clicked that they did 20 minutes of ALS. So two boxes that don't often go together, that we thought something interesting would be happening at scene. So Inez was one of 3 students, and these 3 students looked through initially about 900 incidents. It was about 550 after duplicates were removed. The 3 students painstakingly looked through about 70,000 words. We locked them in a cupboard for five weeks. And of all the themes that we found that the mentioning of family was present in about 40% of cases. So that in the written descriptions of the real case notes that our paramedics wrote over the course of a year, family presence felt like it was important.
So for those that maybe aren't quite aware of the SCAS format, they use TheraPace. Over on your left-hand side, we've got the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest button. Within this section, there is an area for role, so recognition of life extinct, and then there's another section specifically for when 20 minutes of ALS have been carried out. So in the cases that we looked at, both of these buttons were clicked, which typically we found pretty interesting.
So, what did we find? What are our colleagues writing for these patients? This is verbatim, and if there's any identifiable information, we've taken that out. So somebody's saying, okay, we've been called in an 87-year-old lady, slumped on the side of the chair, seen approximately 90 minutes ago, but if you think a distressed family member, that's difficult to gauge. And some signs that this patient maybe is indeed already dead, that there's some post-mortem staining here. And just a little nod that family presence was there, something was going on. So not a strong signal, just at this stage, okay, the family was present. But Inez will say things started to become a bit more stronger.
So another case we had a 64-year-old female who was last seen about 1:30. Partner couldn't wake her at 5:30. Post-mortem was staining was noted, as well as rigor, and rigor mortis in the jaw. CPR was continued, and then additionally the crew had stated the son was downstairs in the flat who had initially commenced CPR, and the family had been distressed throughout the incident.
So again, this time just a little bit more emphasis on the family, a little bit more that the family presence is maybe a factor in there.
Another case we found was another male patient found unresponsive by his wife. On arrival, the patient was cold, there was staining to the groin, the legs, the pupils were fixed and dilated, all signs that were potentially incompatible with life. However, again, the crew mentioned they continued CPR in view of the wife's attempts.
So now it's becoming more explicit. We're finding more evidence that actually our crews are saying to us, I'm continuing this in some way to manage this difficult family dynamic. And potentially the most explicit, the most obvious one.
So this patient had history of cancer. There was no DNA CPR in place. ALS was commenced, PEA throughout. There was enough clinical evidence to carry out a confirmation of death. However, due to family expectations and now being in the ambulance in a public place, decision was made to continue resuscitation efforts despite high likelihood of futility.
So, take-home messages. It can be uncomfortable reading, and is the take-home message simply family presence, sometimes it's really bad? Is it, well, we're reading that quite explicitly in some situations, family presence is prolonging resuscitation, and is it as simple as there's some relationship between family presence and futile resuscitation? I'd say hold in your mind, no, it's too simple. And I think as Shorty has chatted about earlier is the impact of families being there in some moments is going to be entirely beneficial for them and their well-being psychologically, for future anxiety and stress that they may feel. Sometimes that's going to help the family. But in some situations, it may adversely affect, no, that's the wrong word, it may affect what's happening at scene and how confident our clinicians are to pronounce a death when it's suitable. So in a way, our presentation today is to say, take some thoughts away with you. We don't have all the answers. It's a complex area. And we just want to leave you with this thought and chat about it amongst yourself. And if and when these cases come up, chat with Shorty, chat with Donald, chat with the cardiac arrest team to understand the potential effect and the learning from this. So just want to say a big thank you to Inez, who's come down from Inverness to do our first presentation at a conference. And you're going to present in the College of Paramedics. So thanks for listening. So I shamefully stole time there, and I'm not sorry about it. So thanks for bearing with us. Next up for a flash talk, if memory serves me correctly, there's a couple of captains of SALF. They are the quarterbacks of everything that happens in SALFs, and I'm really happy to introduce a colleague, Susan Gardner, who's going to talk to you about some of the Save a Life for Scotland work.
Adam, could I just ask if I get the same amount of time that you got? So, thank you everyone. I'm here to speak to you about Restart a Heart Live. So let's rewind slightly to April 2024. I'm in my house working away. I take a phone call from Lee Myers. Where are you? Still there? Yep, Lee Myers, paramedic, and he has an amazing idea. So his thought was to live stream into the schools in the borders, a CPR and AED awareness session. And we thought, oh, that's interesting. Let's blow this up. So we decided to work with Lee, his brother Michael from South of Scotland Enterprise, and we live streamed last year for 12 hours on the 10th of October. This year, as you see, it's going to be the 1st of October. But first of all, I just want to, I'll just take you back to last year and see what we achieved.
Good morning.
Take your second hand and interlock your fingers together. Push your arms out.
So I'm going to go slow. So, as you can see from here, we achieved the Guinness World Record, which was absolutely amazing. So, where do we take it from here? How do we move forward and make this year bigger and better? So we're really looking for everybody's help with this. We're going to be going live again the 1st of October, live streaming from day 6 in Edinburgh. This year, we have RC UK on board. We've got Northern Ireland, Yorkshire Ambulance Service, ACE supporting it. So already it's grown much bigger. So it's gone from something that started off in Scotland with Wales on board last year, and now it's a national event. Oh, sorry, the clicker isn't working too well. We're trying to get all communities involved. So we make this very, very easy for people. There's no equipment needed, okay? So we're trying to get all the schools registered. They need no equipment. Everyone's got a rucksack. You can pop your jacket in there, a pillow, cushion, teddy, and everyone gets involved. So it's very easy to do. We're going to do all the work here because we understand teachers are, very busy, full curriculums. We need 20 to 30 minutes of their time to get the children into the assembly hall, all eyes on Restart Heart Live, and they can learn the life-saving skill. There'll be sessions in the morning. There'll be a couple of sessions directed at primary schools, and there'll also be sessions in the afternoon for secondary schools. But there's also time there for businesses to get involved, maybe in their lunch break, 4 o'clock. And the most important thing is the children will, learn that life-saving skill. They will take that home to their parents in the evening and ask their parents to link into this. So how can you help? You can go onto our website within the next week or so. We will have a letter on there that you can take to your school. You can print that off, take it to your school and ask them to get involved in this. Anyone that's wanting to help, you can also support the school on the day by going in there. And also, if you can share anything that we're putting out on social media and just tell everybody about this. You can also do a short video, a 10-second video. And now it could be that it's your local gym or local club, your local ambulance station. We've got some from the community first responders, but I'll just show you a few from last year. And thank you very much. I hope you will help with this.
I'm not giving up, no, not me. Even when nobody else believes, I'm not going down that easily. So don't give up on me. I will fight for you. I always do until my heart is black and blue.
Those videos makes me proud to be Scottish, doesn't it? I love that. They took that video on the one sunny day that we had last year, probably. Otherwise, everybody's out on the road in the snow. So wonderful, Susan, and what a lovely video to to kind of celebrate 10 years worth of work in a way. It's a real feel-good video. So I'd now like to introduce our penultimate speaker. So I'd like to introduce Daniel Handy. So Daniel is a community engagement administrator at St Andrew's First Aid. And Daniel is going to give us a flash talk on getting your foot in the door, practical action for raising CPR awareness within Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. So big hand for Daniel.
Hi everyone. One of the most consistent messages that I receive from both out with and within Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities across Scotland is that it can be difficult sometimes to get your foot in the door. And to a certain extent that can be true, but I think only because it requires you to do more than you normally would for a mainstream community group or charity. Over the past year and 9 months at St Andrew's First Aid, I've made it my mission to increase awareness within Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities and charities of the free CPR and first aid sessions that we offer. And in that time, myself and our volunteers have demonstrated CPR and first aid to well over 1,000 people from these communities, coming from 25 different organisations all across Scotland. So potentially one of the questions you're thinking now when you're looking at me is you're thinking, well, Daniel, did you have any connections? Do you have any connections that maybe made it easier for you to get your foot in the door with these communities, either through friends, family members, or religiously? And the answer to that question on all fronts is no. And the reason why I'm telling you this is so that you know that when I talk about the actions that we took and the success that we had, it's been achieved not by who we knew, but the actions and what we did. So what did we do? So the first thing first is we were proactive. When I first started out, I couldn't understand why people from these backgrounds and community groups and charities weren't just going onto our website and filling in our online booking form or emailing in, like the rest of mainstream was, and continue to do so. The answer to that question is a 5-hour flash talk. The answer, but at the end of the day, the reality is that they weren't coming to us, which means that we needed to be proactive and go to them. And that's what we did. What did that look like? It's just going onto Google and researching them. I'm not going to say it's anything special, right? But that's what we did. We researched who were our local community groups and charities, contacted them, and continued that open communication with them to ensure that we delivered those CPR demonstrations to their service users. The second thing we did to get our foot in the door and build trust within these communities is by showing up ourselves, by me specifically showing up, making sure that I build that trust with them face to face, that they understand and see what it is we're offering, and that they hear it from me specifically as well, which was very important. So if you're organising something within these communities, make sure that it's you, if possible, that's going as much as you can. The third and final thing we've done to get our foot in the door is truly believe in the work that we're doing. We have to truly believe, because at the end of the day, people will challenge us. We will be challenged internally, externally, about what we're doing. Externally, I've been challenged by people within the communities about whether or not I'm going to use them as a tick-boxing exercise. And that's something that, unfortunately, some of these organisations within BAME community and charities have experienced. And so that's something that I've got to make sure that I truly believe in, so I get that across to them, that that's not what I'm about. The second way you might be challenged is internally. Other people within your organisation might not understand what you're doing. They might also be interested in ensuring that equal action is taken and advocating for equal action as opposed to equitable action. At St Andrew's First Aid, our mission is to create a nation of lifesavers for everyone, regardless of your cultural background, regardless of your ethnicity, whether or not English is your first language, regardless of your geographic location, your socio-economic status. and regardless of whether or not you've been in this country 100 years or 100 minutes. And if you'd like to find out more about the work we're doing within Black, Asian and minority ethnic community groups, we have a stall downstairs. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. A real impassioned presentation there, and it's really fitting with the tone of today. So our final presenter is the second captain of the ship of SALFS, who you would have seen probably emailing you all and chasing you all up and keeps everybody right. And so Dominika Skrocka is going to come and give us a talk about some myth busting with Good Sam. So welcome up, Dominika.
Thanks, Adam. It's Skrocka, actually. So today I'm going to talk about Good Sam again. This is the SCAS 25 edition. Today I'm going to be doing some myth busting. So, yeah, it's a little bit delayed, the clicker, but anyway, what I want you to do is take part in an exercise with me. So I'm going to show you some statements, and I'd like you to raise your hands if you think the statement is a myth, right? So we're going to start with a fairly easy one. Statement number 1. You have to be certified to register as a Good Sam responder. So raise your hands if you think this is a myth. Yes, well done. That's right. You don't have to be certified. We only ask that you know and you are prepared to deliver hands-only CPR. Just as a call handler would instruct or ask a bystander to do in a case of cardiac arrest. You have to be a healthcare professional. Who here thinks this is a myth? Yay! That's right. Do you know why? Because one small study found that for the system to be effective, you would need at least 10 Good Sam responders per 1 square kilometer in an urban area. So, can we do it with just healthcare professionals? No, we need the general public. Statement number 3, you'll get alerts every week. Who here thinks this is a myth? You've got the game right. So yes, this is a myth because an average Good Sam responder gets alerts, maybe about 2 or 3 alerts per year. So certainly not every week, but it will depend on an area you're in. For example, whether you're in a rural or an urban area. Next statement, you'll be asked to go too far away. Does anyone here know how far a Good Sam responder gets alerted? That's right. Good Sam responders get alerted to a maximum 500-meter distance as the crow flies, so no further than that. And somehow, misleadingly, there is a little bit on the app that you can adjust, but doesn't actually do anything. So, not in Scotland. Sorry. You'll be asked to do rescue breaths. Who here thinks it's a myth? That's right. That's a myth. It's because we don't ask you to do anything else than what a call handler would ask a bystander to do in event of an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. people will know if you decline an alert. That could be a tricky one. What do you think? A myth? It is a myth. Because do you know what happens when you decline an alert? Absolutely nothing. The system is fully automated. Not even the call handler will know that a Good Sam responder was alerted. They won't know if you turned up unless the person on the call tells them that somebody here turned up who says they're a Good Sam responder. And most importantly, the dispatch process will not be affected. So sign up today. We've simplified the sign-up page. It's very easy and straightforward. And so go out to the world and promote this to whoever you can you see. Encourage communities and neighbours to help support each other to protect our nearest and dearest. It's what we do. Thank you.
Wonderful. So we're roughly on time, and we have just over 10 minutes for some questions. So if I can ask everybody that presented to come and join me on stage, and then whilst you're joining us on stage, I think Arid, you have a mic. So I'm gonna hit the verbal pause button. Barbara, I'll just get that to you in the middle, just in case anybody has to respond. So, to kick us off, for any of our 7 presentations, has anybody got any questions that they'd like to ask? Hand up there, go for it, Arid.
Yeah, my name is Ewan from Operation Heartstart. So this one's for Ben, for PadMap. And thank you again. That tool is one of the ones for charities like us that we've been waiting for to optimise pad location. However, the historic problem we've always had is finding a host. So while PadMap will maybe say, right, in the middle of that street there is the perfect location, getting someone to host it isn't always going to be ideal. So it's possibly going to be on public buildings or sporting locations. Those are the ones that kind of come to us for that kind of support in placing a pad. So is there any, maybe in future versions, is there potentially an option for, right, we want to place a pad here, how will that look for improving outcomes in that area? And the second one is on potentially introducing data from the deprivation index to see if that would have any effect on outcomes as well, and introducing that into the pad map.
Couple of good questions. One of those, the last one's probably more a Gareth question than a me question. Yeah, in terms of rather than finding an optimal location, being able to choose a point. So the way it actually works is there's a fixed grid of 200-meter points. So one of the things we did discuss was whether or not we would make it possible for you to select a point and then see what the data says about that location. Exactly what you're describing. There's people with a sports club. They want it near their sports club. It makes total sense. And we want to encourage that. Gareth and the rest of the team have always been saying that we want to encourage people to place pads, not make them feel guilty about putting it somewhere. So we have thought about that. And then the other thing which we've done on the site is specifically tried to encourage people to buy two, if that makes sense. So place one in your sports club, but look to raise money to place one in an optimal location. And I think we're partnering with St John Scotland, is that right? Talking to them. So we're in the process of trying to partner with a charity who can then place the pad and be the guardian for that pad as well. I don't know, Gareth, do you want to answer anything on the second one?
Just 2 very quick things. I think first is pad guardianship is a big deal. And it's a very astute point you raised. It's not trivial, and it's often not talked about much, but it is a rate-limiting step in the success of PAD schemes. I don't have a solution to the problem you raise. How do we find guardians in the areas where there aren't guardians? But it's something we should be looking at. The second part of the question, if I understood you correctly, was how does the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation feed into this data? Yeah, and it's interesting. I think it feels like there are two aspects to that. One is cardiac arrests happen twice as often in deprived communities. So if you look at SIMD 1, the least well-off communities in Scotland, they have around 28% of all cardiac arrests. SIMD 5, the most well-off parts of Scotland, have half of that, about 14%. So I think if you follow where the cardiac arrests are happening, then you will inevitably end up putting more defibs in more deprived areas. The problem is, of course, that there's a bit of an inverse care relationship here, in that the communities who need the defibs least can afford them, and the communities who need the defibs most are least able to afford them. And so we're trying to solve that problem, and lots of people are trying to solve that problem around Scotland by doing things like speaking to local councils to see if they can generate funds to help procure defibs that can then be adopted by communities that need them. But you raised some very important points, and these are not easy problems to solve.
I was just going to say the one thing to add to that is if you actually look at the Scottish map, if you just go to Scotland on PAD-map and you select 100 pads and then zoom in on the optimal locations, they're nearly all in SIMD 1 and 2 because that's where most of the cardiac arrests are happening. So as it happens, it's sort of factored in by the fact that more cardiac arrests are happening there.
Thanks, Ben. Any other questions from the audience at all for any of the speakers? I see a hand up the back there, Reg.
Hi, it's for the Good Sam app. You say that to be certificated is a myth, and I believe that, but when my wife's tried to sign up for it, it was asking for a certificate, and she is the basic first aid that you would get through Police Scotland.
So in Scotland, we recently updated the registration page, and it no longer asks, if you go through the link on the Save a Life for Scotland page, you'll be taken directly to the link for Scotland, and you'll no longer be asked for a certificate, just a photo ID.
Okay, so, that's great, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dominika. Any other questions from the audience? Just while the audience is maybe thinking, if I can maybe ask one to Vicky, if that's okay. I mean, we've all been familiar for years with that kind of classic chain of survival, very kind of medically focused, and you introduced something that to me felt quite new, that kind of chain of aftercare. Is there work happening elsewhere in the world that's looking into this? Is that something that's been published? Because that feels like quite a nice take on just how important, with more survivors, how aftercare and the well-being of bystanders is.
I think that this idea of needing to look after the bystanders is starting to come up in other countries. We're part of, or we started here with the group in Norway who have been doing bystander support for about 5 years now. We've partnered with them through Chest Heart and Stroke Scotland, and Uzma, who's going to come and talk shortly. And I think we've got 9 countries now who are involved in what's called SABRE, so Support After Bystander Resuscitation, is this kind of collaboration of trying to get together, because it is quite a new field, it's quite a new idea, this idea of looking after the people who've done the CPR. So you're absolutely right, this is something that's quite new. Actually, I have to say that idea of the bystander journey, I came up with that, I think. I don't, unless someone else has copyrighted it already. I thought of it as a way to, I suppose that, particularly for me, it's that beginning bit as well. So I think we often think about bystanders being involved in CPR, when the person collapses in front of you, but actually there is the whole kind of training aspect as well. And there is conversations going on around, well, how much do we talk to people about the realities of doing CPR? We don't want to put people off, but on the same time, what we're hearing from bystanders is it was so different from the training. Actually, it might have been useful to know what it could actually have been like. And I think we're just at the beginning of those kind of conversations. I think there's a lot more research to be done.
Interesting. Hand up. Oh, there we go. Reach just in front of you.
For Dominika again.
Sorry, there we go.
For Dominika again. Regards Good Sam, does the reporter know that a member of the public may well be coming to the door first? Are they made aware of that? So the first chap at the door may be a member of the public?
No.
They don't know that?
No, the call handler will not know anything about it.
Sorry, the reporter, the person that's phoned it in, sorry.
The person...
The house that's having the CPR event, will they know that a Good Sam responder is turning up?
because the call handler won't know that.
Okay.
So they will not be informed about a Good Sam responder coming in because they might not come. So even if somebody accepts the alert, they might not get there before the ambulance arrives, so they then might be turned away. I guess there are many reasons for that, but the main one is that the system is just fully automated and runs in the background. So the call handlers will not have that information to give to whoever's calling in.
Thank you.
Just take a quick detour and then we'll come down here.
Hiya. This is for Adam and Inez, actually, about the kind of student paramedic view on family bereavement and from what you've learned from the PRFs. As someone who takes student paramedics out quite regularly on the road, what I've noticed is breaking bad news to families is something that's not very well taught and not very well communicated within the university settings. Have you noticed, I don't know if this is going back to universities with your study, obviously breaking bad news is difficult for us who work on the road as well. Is it something that's going to be better, not taught, but communicated to student paramedics? Because I think, this inability to say to families, there's nothing else that we can do, isn't well put forward in the community, and especially for student paramedics coming out on the road. Is this something that's going to be kind of taken into the education?
Yeah. Well, I guess, Inez, you've been through the first life cycle of the 3 years at university. And knowing that I think all your exams are finished, nobody can fail you now, so you can be really honest if you want to. I'm thoughtful there's a few lecturers in the crowd. So Inez, what are your thoughts on that kind of a student experience? Does that feel true?
I think coming from a student perspective, university-wise, we've not really covered direct conversations with families. I think this is something that we, if we're unfortunate, or for whichever way you'd like to look at it, our mentors are probably the ones that we speak to the most when it comes to, I know I've been to a lot of jobs where we have had to be the ones that break the news, and I feel like the education personally that I have had has been from my mentors as opposed from university. That isn't to say university doesn't discuss it. I can't speak on the programme. I know RGU has currently gone through a total rephase, so that their programme will now be completely different from what I have just completed. So maybe it is something to take on board. However, if it's something, even as as a clinician, that you feel your student isn't feeling confident in, have the discussion with the universities. They're not going to turn around and say that they can't do it, but from experience, no, it's not something we covered at uni.
I think from
that kind of answers what you were asking.
I think from a feedback perspective is our approach for this, and for us as the research innovation team working alongside the clinical directorate, kind of hand in hand, working with Shorty and Donald on this, is some of that is quite clear, isn't it? It's people saying, I know this is futile, I essentially know they're dead, but I'm continuing because the family's here. So we've chosen that method because we want to bring to life what's really happening at scene. And the common method of measuring this is often by the retrospective surveys that come out to all of us. Hi, were you involved in a futile resuscitation? Hi, when was the last time this? So we're trying to give voice to the reality of what people are experiencing. I guess maybe before we start to be able to feed that back, our good practice or checks and balances is we know that we might have a bit of bias. We want to try and add some more rigor to our analysis. And then in time, we want to kind of feed that into our cardiac arrest colleagues and think, what is that message? Is it too crude just to say, this is rubbish, we suck at this? That doesn't feel fair. These are very difficult cases. So yeah, we just want to kind of keep working through it, and that's the part where anybody who's done the research modules, you think, bloody hell, research takes a long time, doesn't it? It's a bit woolly, but we just want to get the messaging right and make sure we don't give the wrong conclusions. And so, I reached with somebody just at the... There we go.
It's for yourself, Dominika, just regarding the Good Sam app. First one, are we at a stage where we've got kind of rich data about the impact that the Good Sam responders are having on the out of hospital cardiac arrest survival? And the second one, if it's a fully automated service, are there any safety implications for the responders themselves? Like, who knows that that person's single responding into a stranger's house, and obviously if someone doesn't know they're coming, could they easily just say, no, I don't want you here, thanks, off you go? Like, what's the processes there?
These are very, very good questions. There's a handbook for Good Sam responders. When you sign up, you can download it and have a look through it, and some of these questions are looked at, especially the safety one. So the Scottish Ambulance Service will know, but not the call handler. Another part of the Scottish Ambulance Service will know that you've responded to a cardiac arrest, and you'll be contacted after the event. Not entirely sure about safety in terms of at the actual arrest. I might pass that over to someone else in a moment. But we always say, no, it's fine. But we always say, you judge the situation as you approach it, and if you feel unsafe to go into the situation, you just don't go into it, and you wait for the ambulance service to arrive, or you leave, you keep yourself safe. What was, sorry?
Just about data.
Oh, the data, yes. So we do have some data on where alerts are, and I've actually talked about that at the previous symposium, and there is a little video with some heat maps on YouTube. But just to say briefly, then we don't have much data in terms of Good Sam responses and survival rates. Is that right?
So Dom, if I could just cut across there in a very collegial way, hopefully, is Dom, I think what we're hearing is just how important and how intriguing Good Sam is. So if I may, see if anybody has any additional questions, just in the interest of time, could we grab Dominika and any of the other speakers after, if that's okay, just so we're moving on. So can I just get a final round of applause for our presenters.